please. Let's go. Free yoga mat. So very exciting. I know, right? Jazz hands, everyone. So we will also be taking a few polls today during the episode, and Facebook Live participants can also answer the polls in the comment section of the video as well. So a recording of today's webinar is also going to be available on our website as well. So for those of you who can't make it with us live today, you'll also be able to check it out later and at your convenience on hiddenheroes.org/C3. And I'll also be following up with you later on. So if you have any questions, please shoot them my way. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jennifer as we get started. Take it away, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheena, for having me. And we're just so excited to be here and share our program, and super thrilled about everything that you're doing and how much passion you have for supporting caregiver wellness. So we're excited about that as well, because that's our area of interest too. And just thrilled to be here and talk a little bit about what is yoga and why is it good for caregiver self-care. So, and I also have a couple of guests with me, right? Because I'm really not a one-woman show at all. And I'm really supported by Mckay, who is a registered yoga teacher, and she's a trained social worker, and she's a former family caregiver, and she spends a lot of time in our Facebook group, Yoga for Caregivers, sort of managing the activities and teaching and working with our volunteers. And we also have Sonia Quijada with us, who is also a trauma-informed yoga teacher. She's a wellness coach. She's a resilience trainer. She is also an Army veteran with nearly 30 years of service. And she's like my right-hand woman. And so we all sort of work together to make this community sort of come to life. So we can probably just get right ahead with the slides. So we wanted to talk about really the biopsychosocial impact of caregiving. And of course, we don't have to tell caregivers too much about that, right? Because you're living it every day. But I think it helps set the framework of the discussion and why self-care is so important for caregivers. And we want to really define self-care and talk about what it really means to practice self-care, and also get into what is yoga, what really is yoga, and also introduce our community, Yoga for Caregivers. And then we want to close by doing a short mindfulness exercise at the end. In terms of the impact of caregiving, we know that it can have a significant impact, right, on your physical health, your psychological health, your emotional health, and even really your spiritual health. It really affects your whole health. Just being a caregiver puts you at an increased risk for poor health outcomes, poor mental health outcomes, more so than the non-caregiver general population, essentially. And caregivers are under such significant amounts of stress. And that often is the underlying root of other serious health conditions and mental health conditions. And so how do you try to prevent that from happening, really? And we know too from research that caregivers tend to defer and delay their own healthcare needs. They tend to not go to the doctors. They're not practicing self-care. They don't put themselves first. And so they really are less engaged in health prevention sorts of behaviors. And because of that, the research has shown that caregivers are more likely to experience depression, more likely to have poor health habits, poor sleep habits, poor dieting habits, and just they are at increased risk for things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, arthritis, right? All those kinds of things, because when you have inflammation, that in itself becomes a new reliable predictor of other kinds of chronic health concerns. So that sort of sets the framework, really, I think, of why it's so important for caregivers to practice self-care. And you can go ahead, Megan, to the next slide. So this is just a simple definition that's taken from the Oxford Dictionary, really, about self-care. So the practice of self-care is taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. Okay, so I highlighted here the active role because that is really key. You have to actually do something about your self-care. Like, it's not enough to just know, yeah, well, I hear about self-care and I really know how so, important it is. And I know that I should really, give myself some time to de-stress, but you just keep putting it in the back burner and putting it in the back burner. So one of the things about self-care is really having mindfulness. And if you have mindfulness, then you have the ability to reflect on how you're really doing. What do you really need to feel better supported in your role? How are you doing emotionally, right? If you have that ability to be mindful and engage in self-reflection, and you say, you know what, I'm really stressed out. I've got this serious thing that's going on this month and all these medical appointments that I'm going back and forth to, and maybe some new diagnoses, and all of these things are just adding up. And you really need to take some time to sort of focus on your own well-being. And we also know that when caregivers actually do that and they take the time to focus on themselves and they take good care of themselves, that it really puts them in a better position to take care of the person that they're caring for, right? And we also know that the research has shown that if caregivers are engaged in and practicing their own well-being, that person that they're caregiving for is less likely to have emergency room visits, right? Because they're being cared for. The quality of care that the caregiver is able to give actually goes up, right? Because they're in that mode and they're taking care of themselves, and then they're better able to give of themselves to other people. And also can be improved relationships can improve, right? Because when you don't have self-care and you're not practicing taking care of yourself, and maybe you are really truly stressed out, you might be more likely to snap at people and just sort of, caregivers have a tendency to live in that hypervigilant state where there's a lot of anxiety anyway. And so if you're taking that time to sort of step back and de-stress, and you're making it a priority for yourself, then you're more likely to be effective, not just in your caregiving role, but in other aspects of your life as well. You can go ahead, Megan, and go to the next slide. So we already really kind of touched on why self-care is so important for caregivers, and that it increases your self-awareness. And that's super important. It's important for everyone. But when you start to really think about what self-care is for you, right? Because what self-care is for you, Shanna, is going to be different from me. It's going to be different from Ellen and Sonia. There's, probably 8 billion people in the world. So that means that there's potentially 8 billion different ways to practice self-care. But when you are able to be mindful and you're able to think about, the things that you enjoy, maybe it's taking a walk, getting out into nature, maybe it's journaling, maybe it's calling a friend and just venting a little bit, maybe it's, setting more clear boundaries. And that's something else I think that I want to try to convey here, is that self-care isn't just me time, right? We're not just having bubble baths and me time. It's also about setting clear boundaries, letting people know what you need, and going to that doctor appointment.
And also boundaries for ourselves. I mean, I know that's a problem that I have, is I do not set clear boundaries for myself and allowing myself this self-care and not adhering to the bubble bath mantra.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's hard to do, right? I mean, no, I'm certainly not saying that self-care is easy, and I'm certainly guilty of not practicing my own self-care, and I need to be, reminded and prodded, and I need accountability, right? And I have people in my life who really help me with that, and definitely give me a reminder. But when we're able to find those things, and like I said, there's so many different ways that you can sort of practice self-care in all the different realms, whether it's health, psychosocial, whatever it might be. It lets us live a healthier, more balanced lifestyle. Go ahead, Megan. So now we get into sort of the fun part, because I know Ellen and Sonia and I we can chit chat forever about yoga and what yoga is. And really, when you think about what is yoga, it's really a deep philosophical question in my mind, because it's not just an exercise routine. So I want to be sure that people understand that. And I know you have some polls going too. So I'd be curious.
I was surprised, honestly, that not enough people needed validation for the yoga pants purchase, because I know personally I have 3 drawers full of yoga pants and I have never once done yoga. So for me, this is validation for those yoga pants, and I fully intend to use them now. Just saying. But
Yeah.
It looks like self-care was the primary goal, or the primary interest in yoga, which is actually probably better than the yoga pants validation.
Yeah, exactly. You got to start somewhere, right? Like whatever leads you to, put a little micro step towards your health and
exactly. Baby steps. First it's the pants, next it's the self-care.
Exactly. So yoga in Sanskrit means union, or to integrate. And what we're really talking about is integrating the mind, the body, and the spirit. And yoga is really rooted in Indian tradition and Indian philosophy. It's really a way of life. And the practice focuses on postures, or the asana. It brings in breathing techniques, or the pranayama, which is your life force energy when you're having your breath. And that's a significant part of the practice. And it also focuses on bringing in meditation, or dhyana. And another thing that we really want to emphasize, because there's a lot of myths that surround the practice of yoga, because we see a lot of images in magazines and at Instagram, some skinny young person is standing on a mountaintop doing a headstand or something. It's just like, okay, like that's not yoga. That's really not yoga for real people and in real life situations. And that's certainly not the sorts of yoga that we're trying to promote in our community. We believe that yoga is an accessible practice. And what we mean by that is we believe it's accessible to everyone and everybody, regardless of your age, your gender, your sexual orientation, whatever your health abilities are, your body shape and sizes, right? We can make yoga accessible to you. It's one of these things that yoga really begins where you are. So you don't have to be an experienced yogi. You don't have to be flexible. You could be in a wheelchair and practice yoga. I mean, I have seen some veterans, with their prosthetics, and it's amazing what people can do with yoga and their practice. And Sonia does adaptive yoga classes, and she's amazing with that. And so I guess I think it's a barrier for some people, I think in their mind's eye, when they see all of these images and they just think, well, I could never do that. I could never stand.
Guilty.
Right?
Me? I am one of those.
Yeah. And then another common myth really is that men don't do yoga. And that's really untrue, because there's this thought that, okay, yoga's for women and it's for older women even, and again, that's just another, it's just another common misperception. And similarly, we offer chair yoga in our community. And you do not have to be a senior to practice chair yoga. I mean, you can still get these amazing benefits, and actually it can still be quite a workout.
I know I spend 90% of my life in my office chair. So chair yoga is probably my way to go.
True. And it's so helpful, and it's so needed right now, right? Because everybody now is in front of their Zoom more so than ever before. They're in their desks, they're in front of their computers, and they're all hunched over. And yeah, I mean, Sonia and Ellen, they work with us, and they actually provide some corporate yoga to medical frontline workers, which is amazing. And they're really appreciative of it, because their neck and their shoulders, and just realizing, how you can just take some time and just sort of de-stress and get a little bit of a workout right there in your chair. The other barrier that I've heard is yoga takes up too much time. I don't have time for a 90 minutes class, especially caregivers. Who has time for that? Well, guess what? You can do 5 to 10 minutes of some simple moves and some breathing and some relaxation, and you can really shift from getting out of that fight and flight response and into your rest and digest mode and sort of take things down a notch. And that's really beneficial for caregivers, and it's beneficial for all of us, really, right? Because we're all sort of experiencing this really strange moment in time where we have this collective trauma, really, from the pandemic, and there's lots of grief, and just we're still functioning in high levels of anxiety, and so it's helpful, really, I think, for all of us to try to give yoga a try. Some other things about yoga too is that all yoga is not the same. So really you have to be careful, like what yoga class you show up at, because you don't want to maybe go to a Bikram hot yoga class that might be out there. And I think what a lot of people think about yoga, they think about maybe the traditional classes that might be offered at your gym, the local gym, or the studio even, and that tends to be a vinyasa style of yoga, which is a very cardio aerobics kind of flow that you get yourself into, and you're definitely going to sweat, and it's going to be a little challenging, and you're going to have a sequence, and you're going to build up heat in the body and all those kinds of things. And then there's something called Iengar Yoga, which is very much focused on your form and your posture and the alignments and how you're stacking the bones when you're in the poses. Right. And then we have a yin or a restorative yoga. And this is when we hold maybe the postures for a longer periods of time. So maybe 3 to 5 minutes we hold the poses. And we also use a lot of props like bolsters or pillows and blankets and blocks and straps. And we really are trying to just let go of our muscles and release that tension while we're in the poses. And so there's over 100 different styles of yoga probably that are out there, and they all have their different thoughts, traditions, and sort of like lineage that they each sort of come from. So in yoga for caregivers, we really focus on slow, mindful yoga very intentionally, because we believe that's the best and work for caregivers. So we'll get into that. So yoga for caregivers.
What about the blankie one? I like anything that involves a blankie. Is it fluffy or?
Yeah, no, it's restorative yoga often uses a lot of poses on the ground, and it just uses the blankets or maybe eye pillows. I mean, it's very relaxing, and
so nap time is encouraged. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, in all of our sessions, typically we close with Shavasana or corpse pose, which is really just a time to just relax, let go, and reintegrate sort of everything that your body has just sort of absorbed by going through the practice and letting it all sort of soak in. And some people do fall asleep in that period of time, and that's quite okay. And there are other practices where like yoga nidra, which is like a yogic sleep practice, which is very calming and relaxing and good for the nervous system. And definitely people fall asleep. It is what it is. Not everybody does, but yoga is a unique experience. So it's whatever your experience is with it. When the pandemic, came on, and sort of, at the early onset of sort of February, March of 2020, I stood up this Yoga for Caregivers as sort of a community care project, because I knew that caregivers were going to be under increased amounts of pressure and demands, and that everything we know about the challenges that caregivers face was going to be exacerbated. And no longer being in the healthcare system, right? Because I used to be in the VA for almost 20 years, and I was really trying to find a way to give back. And I think that happens when we're experiencing sort of a natural disaster or a crisis of some kind as a country. There are people who are out there who are altruistic and want to help volunteer and give back. And this was something that I could do as a new yoga teacher. really was to try to create a space that was just for caregivers, to teach caregivers the tools that I have learned that I knew were so helpful in my personal journey to help me manage stress. And so we created Yoga for Caregivers. We offer it online. We have a private Facebook group for this community. We have around 200 or so caregivers that are in our community. And we really, I mean, we understand the research benefits, because yoga, I mean, yoga is a common complementary practice that's often offered in throughout the healthcare system, really as an alternative to medications and other forms of treatments, because we know that it's an evidence-based practice. So we want to be able to offer caregivers an evidence-based tool that we know is going to be supportive of their health, their mental health, and their wellness. And we're doing this for free. We are calling it a Caregiver Kula. And a Kula is basically an intentional community of the heart. And it's bringing people together from all walks of life. And our volunteers, many of them have been caregivers themselves or are currently caregivers. And so they understand the journey that caregivers face and the unique challenges that they have. And they wanted to be part of this movement, and they wanted to give back. And they really are the heart of our community, because without their support, we would not be able to offer these services. And we have several committed yoga teachers and wellness educators that are helping us to offer free wellness workshops and events. And we had National Family Caregiver Month in 2020. We had like 15 speakers from across the country, and we were doing all different kinds of workshops focused on around caregiver wellness.
That's great.
So this is us. And this is Sonia and Andrea Trank. She's one of our volunteers, and she's sort of really an ambassador. And she has just been doing like a 6 weeks yoga foundations for caregiver class for us, which has been wonderful. But our goal is to really empower these family caregivers that are out there to learn these practices and start to integrate them into their lives so that they can take a first step into bringing some more health and wellness and some balance into their life. You go ahead. So why is yoga awesome for caregivers? Well, because we know that it fosters a deep sense of self-awareness, which fosters self-compassion. And it's so important that caregivers foster self-compassion for themselves. And this can really help them to reduce their feelings of stress and anxiety and overwhelm. It also helps them to practice acceptance, because when you get in on the mat, you know, you just never know what your body's going to be feeling like, what emotional state you might be in that day, and whatever it is, it's all okay. And when you have that mindfulness again, then you're able to be self-aware, and you're able to just accept and not bring any judgment with you, and just sort of let it go. That's a big expression in the yoga community, is like, let it go, just let it go. And although that might be really hard to do, it starts with a little bit of practice, just showing up for yourself. You know, you show up on the mat for yourself in the same way that you show up for caregiving for someone else. And you just never know what's going to show up for you that day when you're on the mat and you're taking your practice. Just like you never know what challenges you're going to be faced with in your caregiving role that day. It's a journey. Go ahead, Megan. So some of the benefits of slow, mindful yoga for caregivers is it promotes mindfulness, which we've talked about a lot. And as you become more mindful, then you can start to get into your body, and you can understand your thoughts more, you know, gain clarity, emotion regulation. You get more in tune with your emotions and how your body's feeling, where you might be carrying the stress and the tension. You can better regulate and just sort of have a better sense of where are you at today, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. How stressed and anxious are you feeling today? Or is today maybe a better day? And so it fosters also greater resilience, and caregivers need all the tools in their toolbox to help them foster resilience because they have a long haul. It also improves neuroplasticity. Well, what does that mean? It means that when you're practicing mindfulness and you're breathing and you're doing that meditation, there are changes that are happening in your brain. And those changes are helping you to function more effectively. And there is evidence-based research, again, because this is an evidence-based tool, that we know that practicing slow, mindful yoga can help reduce symptoms of depression. It can help chronic pain. It helps to reduce inflammation, which we've already heard is a thing for caregivers that they need to be aware of because they're at risk for that. And it's really beneficial for all sorts of chronic health conditions, from arthritis to diabetes, osteoporosis, all sorts of things that caregivers might be faced with. So this is really important for us, and this is the path that we feel like is good for caregivers to consider. And we are sort of targeting caregivers who have no yoga experience, but really the slow, mindful yoga movement is the new movement. You can go to a gym and you can show up, and I mean, the whole world is in that aggressive cardio, fast moving world.
Not my scene. No, thank you.
But if you can tap into that slow mindfulness yoga practice, you can really almost consider it an advanced yoga practice in many ways. So again, I think it's another myth that if you're just practicing slow yoga and you're doing yoga nidra and you're not doing that aggressive, fast cardio, stretchy, yoga practice, that you're not practicing yoga or you're not really a yogi. And yes, you are. Yes, you absolutely are. And we have our caregivers in our group who have been really amazing and have been giving us some really powerful feedback, which has just really been motivating us to stay on this course. And I want to share with you one of these caregiver testimonies that we recently received. And this caregiver says, "My husband was diagnosed with the early onset of Alzheimer's disease about 3 years ago. The Alzheimer's support group seems to have horror story after horror story, which I have accepted, but I don't need to read. This support group seems to have something I'm desperately needing. 10 minutes of stretches and meditation suggestions. I can't leave him to go to yoga classes, but I was able to make this class this morning and it was very helpful. My mantra is, just for today, I am able to make it. Just for today." Which
I love that. That's powerful.
It was so motivating. And I mean, when we first got that feedback, I mean, I had tears in my eyes because I was like, okay, because sometimes you just don't hear back from people and you think you're just out in the universe and you're not really knowing how you're impacting people. And so to have feedback like that was just really, really amazing. And I want to share one other that we got just around the turn of the new year. And she says, "I want to share the words that come to mind when I think about yoga for caregivers: gratitude, comfort, joy, relaxation, calm, energy, love, and availability. Too often, the offerings for caregivers are on a schedule that doesn't work for our household, are limited to technology, time, capabilities that just don't work for me. Yoga for Caregivers is here right on Facebook. Yoga for Caregivers sessions are available in varied increments, which allows me to pick and choose what works in my schedule and comfort level for every single day or once a week as I choose. Yoga for Caregivers is a gift that takes my breath away. In the same way that I show up for my veteran, the teachers in this page and the group show up for me, without expectation and with our best interest in mind. So I strongly encourage all caregivers to join this group and afford yourself some true time to recharge, refocus, and refresh. For yourself, your health, and your peace of mind, it is possible."
Sold. Yep, you've got me. That's for sure.
And that's true. We do try to offer variations in our time frames for the classes because we do know that, caregivers don't have 90 minutes, and that might be a traditional class, a 60 or 90-minute class. But
Yep.
we specifically have classes that are 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a half an hour. Really, the half an hour, 45 minutes is the longest class that we have. And although we do the classes live, we definitely leave the replays and everything so people can watch at their own schedule. But we also do mindful moments that Sonia leads and 5-minute meditations. And so, yeah, we're doing a variety of things and trying to make these classes accessible to all caregivers.
Interesting.
So I brought in here 2 quotes from pretty famous yoga spiritual teachers here, because I thought what they had to say about, in my view, caregiving was really right on target about yoga sort of being like, I've sort of equated yoga to be a journey, a personal journey, just as caregiving is really a personal journey. And the first quote is, caring for each other with patience, tolerance, and humility is part of what it means to walk a spiritual path. And that's what caregivers are doing, right? I mean, you don't have to be a quote unquote spiritual person, and yoga is in no means by a religion at all. It's not a religion, but it is a philosophy and a way of life, and it's true. I mean, the second quote here from a spiritual teacher, Ram Dass. He wrote a national bestseller in the 70s. I think it was for a book. It was called Be Here Now. And it was really a transformational book. And in this book, he had this quote where he says, "We are all just walking each other home." And we don't know what that home is, right? But it's implied that we're not alone in this life's journey, that we have support. And it is that mutual support that really binds us. And so when I think about that, to me, I think about the role of a caregiver and how we are really being there to help walk that person home, whatever that might be. That might be a journey into themselves, right? As when and our interconnectedness with the global world and our larger society really could be a lot of different things as you think about it. But for me, I really think that it just resonates for me in the caregiving role. So I think that wraps up some of the information that I definitely wanted to try to impart. And I wanted us to lead a short exercise.
Would it be possible if I ask you a few quick questions?
Yeah, I don't know
about, because I mean, this is amazing information. In fact, honestly, I've never done, a bit of yoga in my life. In fact, this is going to be an incredible opportunity for me to kind of get a short crash course here, right? Yeah. But I know that for me, and something that has prevented me from moving forward and even approaching the idea of yoga, there's just a few different ones. And you've already addressed one of my questions, which is, are there different types of yoga? Because I had this very, I really didn't have much of an idea. I had so many different pictures just rolling through my mind. And from the hot yoga or whatever, that, I'm sorry, I'm not knowing the terminology here, but it sounded a little bit scary. So I might not have approached that one. But one of my biggest questions, does yoga hurt?
Yeah. No.
Does hurt? No. Wrong answer.
It did not hurt. And certainly Ellen and Sonia, please feel free to chime in on these questions. You really should never go into pain in yoga. You need to back off and not do it if that's what's happening in your body. Like, you need to listen to your body. You don't need to look around you and try to contort your body into the shapes that you're seeing, but you just need to try to focus in on listening to the instructor's instruction and their guidance, the yoga teacher guidance, because no, it shouldn't hurt. It's okay if you're sort of moving to your constructive edge and you might be feeling a stretch, but you should not feel pain. Sonia, do you have any?
So I think one of the basic premises that's important for everybody, no matter how many hours or days you've practiced yoga, is that every time you show up, anytime you begin a practice, it's always your practice, and your body is different every day. Every moment it's different. So depending on what effort you exerted yesterday or last week, or how long it's been since you've exerted energy or exercised, your body's going to be different every day. And then the aging process happens also. So whenever you show up for practice in your chair or on your mat or on the floor, it's your yoga, and you get to choose what is best for your body. And you know, your body knows what's good for it. So if your healthcare provider, if your rehab physical therapist, if your chiropractor has told you what you can and cannot do, if your pulmonologist or cardio specialist, if your rheumatologist has told you what you can and cannot do, well, then don't do what you can't, but certainly avail yourself and explore the things you can. And there'll be yoga practices that you can find through our program and others that might demonstrate something that you know you can't do. In an accessible class or a modification class, if it's live, the teacher can usually tell you what to do to accommodate it, so that you can still get the benefit of whatever the posture, the physical body movement was doing, without perhaps endangering whatever your physiology limitations are. But sometimes the yoga, for those 2 minutes that somebody else is in a pose, the yoga is to sit and be still in the moment, to be comfortable, to practice the yoga of observation, to see what other bodies can do, and to just appreciate what your body has been doing for yourself. And so I often tell some of my more limited students who continue to show up, they like the harder classes, but there are some poses they just can't do. Physiologically, they can't get there. And they enjoy sitting in that moment and they often shower themselves with gratitude and love and appreciation for what their body has done to get to the point where maybe now it can't function as well, while they appreciate and bask in the abilities of others.
That's huge. And it sounds like that really, fits in with what we've heard today, is that it's about self-awareness and self-love and gratitude, appreciation, and acceptance as well. And giving ourselves that permission to not feel that we have to be doing something a certain way. Because we receive those external pressures constantly. Yeah. And this is an opportunity to practice that, it sounds like. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Can I ask you 2 more questions, and I promise I will leave you alone and we can go on to our exercise. One of those, it's going to be, I think you kind of covered this, but once again, I've never done yoga. I'm not very flexible. Will I be able to do yoga?
Yes. The short answer is yes, absolutely. You will be able to, because again, it's like what Sonia mentioned, it's yoga starts where you are, and it's your yoga, it's your practice, your body. And there really aren't any ways to practice yoga wrong. We are there to guide, to help, help ensure that you're practicing safely and you're not doing something to injure yourself. That's why I took yoga teacher training, because I was like, I don't know anything about this, and I'm just going to get in there and break my neck or twist my ankle. And I wanted to be sure that I could practice safely. And we have knowledgeable teachers in our community, and Sonia and Ellen are at the top of their game.
Yes.
And you can rest assured with their instructions. So yes. You don't have
all right. Love it. And then my last question, do you need to have any special equipment in order to practice yoga?
No, you don't. That's the bottom line. We recommend that you have a yoga mat, but certainly you can practice on a towel. You can practice this on the floor. We, the props that we use, the blocks, the bolsters, the straps, they help make yoga accessible to you.
Or a chair.
All of those things are props, but they also help make yoga more accessible to you. So it's really your preference. But you can use books, your pillows from home, your blankets off the bed, your kitchen towel. Like, you don't need to invest, big money into props and equipment to practice yoga.
No. All right. Double sold. Okay, cool. My questions are done. I'm really excited about this exercise, so I will go ahead and mute myself from here.
So Ellen, I know you're out there.
I'm here.
All right.
So I'm Ellen, and I teach several classes on yoga for caregivers. My classes range in different times, but I always really try to make them very accessible. And today we're going to do a short practice. It's only going to be 5 minutes. As Jen mentioned, yoga is all about connecting mind, body, and spirit. So we're going to do a little bit of breath, a little bit of movement, and a little bit of meditation, just to kind of give you a taste, a sample of it all. So if you are out there in Facebook land, Zoom land, and you've been sitting listening to our conversation this whole time and you want to stand, standing is great. It's great to change your position, change your shape. So if you want to stand, awesome. If any of you that are on the call right now want to stand, great. I know it's a little challenging because we've got our faces in certain spots. So I'm not going to be standing. I'm going to stay here in the seated position. But we're going to do some really simple movements. As everyone has mentioned here today, listen to your body, do the thing that feels good for you. That's the most important part. So we're going to start with some breath. We use this tool a lot in yoga. I think it's one of the best tools for caregivers because you can use it anywhere, anytime, and it's free. You've got it with you always. Definitely don't need any special props for breath. So just take a couple breaths. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, like a nice big sigh. Let's do that a couple more times. In through the nose and out through the mouth. One more time, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Good. So that sighing breath, that ha breath as it's called in yoga, is great because a lot of times we build tension in our jaw. We can sometimes clench our teeth together. Maybe we shrug our shoulders up. So just that ha breath alone encourages this whole part of the body to relax a little bit. Now we'll change the breath a little bit more. If you can, breathe in and out through your nose. Doesn't matter how long or how deep the breath is, just try a few times in and out. Good. And then see if you can take it just a little bit longer. So if you're cool with counting, maybe count 3 or 4 counts for your inhale and 3 or 4 counts for your exhale. And as you continue on with that, I'm just going to tell you why slowing down your breath is really good. So as Jen mentioned, the difference between rest and digest and kind of that fight or flight feeling is we can really change that in a moment with our breath. The longer the breath, the more relaxed our body is. It kind of flips a little switch for our body to say, hey, we can relax now. We can slow things down. We can be a little calmer. And the muscles start to relax. The digestion improves. It improves your sleep. It improves your circulation. So if we can slow things down just a little, it will be super beneficial overall. So let's take 2 more breaths, maybe those 4 counts, maybe even take it to 5 if you want. Good. And we're going to try to stay with that slower breath as we make these next few moves. Especially in the caregiver community, a lot of tension is through this neck and shoulder, chest area. Sometimes we're carrying a lot, literally and figuratively. Sometimes if we're doing a lot of driving or we're working from a desk, no matter what you do or whether or not you're a caregiver, this area kind of tends to get kind of scrunched up sometimes and up towards the ears. So we're going to try to let that go a little bit. Take the chin down towards the chest. Again, being conscious of the back of the neck and only going as far as it feels good for you. And we're just going to start with a little bit of movement side to side with the head. So you can imagine like you're taking one ear to one shoulder and then the other side. Or maybe it feels better to take the chin towards one shoulder and then the other side. This is all about exploration and just finding the shapes that feel the best for your body. And we're all different. Let's take it a couple more times side to side. Good. And then you're going to take the head all the way to the right. And you're going to take your left hand and just kind of reach it down towards the floor. It doesn't matter where you are, sitting or standing. It's just going to take a little bit more of a stretch on that right side, on the left side, sorry. And then release that side, bring it to center and all the way over to the other side. And if you want, you can take those right fingertips and reach them down towards the floor. And bring it all back to center. Head lifts back up. Good. Roll the shoulders up and back a few times. So really try to bring the shoulders up to the ears and then squeeze them back behind. Yeah, get into those little spaces all around the shoulder blades and the back. And then take it forward a couple times. Come up and forward, up and forward. Good, one more time, up and forward. And then take it up and back and just let those shoulders drop down. Bring the shoulders up towards the ears. Give them a little squeeze and then just let them drop. Yeah, just like that. Good. Do it again. Squeeze it up and then let it drop. Yeah, and you can use a ha breath too. So we're doing all these things at the same time to help loosen up this space. One more time. Bring it up to the ears and then let it out. Very good. So hopefully that area feels a little bit more relaxed. Maybe you feel a little more blood flowing through that space. Good. And we're going to do one more thing. So we're going to do a tiny little meditation. You can close your eyes if you want, or just find a spot to look at that's not going to distract you. And just so you know, it's normal during meditation for your mind to just kind of go off in all different ways. We've become really good at multitasking, or at least thinking we're good at multitasking. So trying to do one thing at a time is usually the challenge now. So settle in, eyes closed if you want, definitely don't have to. And as we're connecting with the body, we're going to do something called a body scan. And all that is really connecting inward and noticing how your body feels today. So bringing your awareness to the top of your head, and you're going to slowly move down the body. So maybe you move down through the muscles in the face. And as you move through those muscles, see if you can soften them just a little, maybe 5%, especially around the eyes and the jaw. And that relaxation starts to flow down through the neck and the shoulders. And again, maybe you can just make a tiny little shift, tiny little softening to feel that much more relaxed. Moves down through the arms, the chest, belly. Softening through the muscles along the spine. Moving down around the hips to the legs. And again, soften what you can. All the way down to the soles of the feet. And keeping that awareness in the body. And finding that count of breath again one more time. Maybe it's that count of 4 in and count of 4 out. Feeling that connection, that breath, the body, you're all in one place, all in one time. Being just here with just this inhale and just this exhale. And then slowly begin to blink the eyes open. Maybe again, roll the shoulders up and back a couple times. And thank you so much for practicing with me today. You all did a wonderful job.
Thank you. That worked. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. This is my first C3. I was a tad nervous, everybody that's listening. And that was such an amazing exercise. I feel so much more relaxed. That was incredible.
I'm so glad to hear that. And that's really what we're trying to give our caregivers. These tiny little moments and tools that you can use outside of our classes. You can use when you need those tools the most. and you never really know when you're going to need them. And sometimes it's not at 9 a.m. on a Monday. So I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And that's exactly what we want to provide to all of our caregivers in our community.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And, you know, with all of that said, I would also like to take a few moments. I know we've had a ton of folks join us both in Zoom and within the HHCC community. I first want to thank everybody for participating with us through both platforms. And I also want to announce our prize winners. And so I know this C3, it's going to be a little bit different because I kind of have my own, internal workings here. But I also want to announce that with these with these prizes, you know, there's some follow-up with this as well. So I would like to announce that Milena, and I'm going to probably butcher some names here, so please forgive me, but Milena De La Hoz and Jenna Lynn Brimmer from HHCC, you will be one of our two of our prize winners for this C3. And then Jennifer Guerrier and Deborah Schultz from our Zoom participants will be our prize winners for today. And what we're going to be doing for this C3 is you will be receiving a free yoga mat. You know, hint, hint, join us for some yoga, right? Which brings me to a special announcement that I would like to share with you today. So I've gotten the opportunity to speak with these wonderful ladies on a few occasions now. I'm a huge fan of what Yoga for Caregivers has been doing. I know that they've been on the radar for many of us within HHCC. And so something that EDF, that the foundation, that Hidden Heroes wants to do is provide an opportunity for our caregivers to practice self-care. It's not just a one-time thing. It's something that, as hard as it is, we want to be able to incorporate. So, there's more details to come, but we're going to be initiating some monthly caregiver yoga within HHCC. So for members of our HHCC community, we're now going to be having monthly yoga brought to us by these amazing ladies. And I'm so incredibly excited. As I may have mentioned a few times, I have never done yoga. So for those of you who might be, kind of on the edge, not entirely sure where you want to go with this might be a perfect opportunity to learn alongside me, because I know in my experience, I've never done this before. This is going to be a learning experience for me. So please feel free to learn alongside me. And this will be great. This is going to be great for us. It'll be great for us to do together. So that's a really exciting announcement that I had a tough time not just proclaiming from the mountaintops earlier on. With all of that said, we have a few questions from those within the community and those from our Zoom attendees. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pull some of these questions. So thank you, Megan, and thank you, Colton, for facilitating the question gathering. We have a few really good ones. One is, my mind and body goes 100 miles an hour all the time. Me too. Will yoga help me to calm down?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, absolutely it will. And Ellen, I don't know if you want to or something.
Yes. So the answer is yes. The answer is, will it happen right away? No. Yoga is a practice, just like anything else. So if your body does one thing, body and mind are going. The practice is, that's why it's called a yoga practice, is to keep trying it over and over and over and over again. And eventually our body gets much better at learning how to relax when we know it's time to relax. Because we kind of live, especially as caregivers, we live in this chronic high stress space, because we have to be really vigilant about what's going on around us, what's going on with our caregiver, making sure that everyone is taken care of. But there are times that you can turn that off, or at least you can turn it down. So as you learn these practices and these tools, when it's an appropriate time to turn that down, you can. And you can kind of start to switch more in and out of that stress and rest space than living in that stress space all the time.
And you have to be aware, right? And again, that's where the mindfulness comes in, because these are tools to help you self-regulate. That's what she's talking about when you're trying to come down from that high anxiety. And so if you show up, right, and you give it a try, and you still start to cultivate that mindful practice, and you start to become more in tune with your body, and you'll get there. I mean, and it's, my monkey mind still keeps going when I show up on the mat, and I think it's annoying, but you try not to be judgmental about it, and try not to beat yourself up about it, and just let it be.
I love that. I find that giving myself permission is a huge piece of just mental peace. So I know that we're starting to run short on time. We do have a few more questions, and what I'll do is I will also try to follow up. I'll gather these from you guys, and I will post these within the community as well. One of them has to do with goat yoga, which I am very curious about as well. But I really want to take a moment to thank you. I know we've covered a lot of ground here, and I also want to take this opportunity with our community to incorporate self-care within our lives. We're going to be following up with more information, not only with the resources that we've included here today within the C3 episode, but also more information to come on monthly caregiver yoga within the HHCC community. If you are joining us via Zoom and you are not already registered within HHCC, I highly encourage you to join us in our Facebook group, and that's where you'll also be receiving these updates so that you can learn more about what's to come. Our group is an inclusive community of military and veteran caregivers of all service areas. If you care for a wounded, ill, or injured service member or a veteran, we would really love to welcome you to this community. So please visit hiddenheroes.org/register to get started. Also be on the lookout for that follow-up email. We will also be including a recording of today's webinar and Jennifer's resources, organization info, and the link to register for the Hidden Heroes community. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. A big thanks to you ladies. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing these wonderful tools with us. This was an incredible conversation. And I would also just like to thank everybody again. A big thanks to our partners at the Wounded Warrior Project and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs for supporting our C3 series. We hope you enjoyed today. Stay in touch and join us next time, and have a wonderful day, all.